Hey everyone, welcome to Unleash Your Life Force. I am your host, Dr. Natasha Nelson. And today's episode is a little bit more like part two of the previous episode, and really the deeper dive about depression, depletion, and it's really about the overlooked and misinterpreted layers of depression. Because there are things that the more I talk to people about depression, there are things that one specific thing that I'll talk about at the end and bring it up, but that most people have never considered or heard about. And it was the key for me that changed everything. And so that's where we're going to go today. If you haven't listened to the previous episode on depression versus depletion, that's okay. You can listen to today's, it's fine. But I would encourage you to go back, and I think it may help just tell the whole story about what we're talking about. There are so many layers with depression. And this is not, a one stop, fix it, figure it out, or one thing only. It's one part and one layer of the many factors. And so my intention with this is really just to see if I can give you I hadn't thought about that moment, and something that might be so helpful for you if you find yourself kind of stuck in that space and feeling depressed and not sure what to do or how to get out of it, or so that's what I want to do with you today. I shared in the previous episode of my experience of losing my business, losing everything that I'd worked so hard for. And what I found, after when I started to kind of get back on the mend of that complete exhaustion and burnout and depletion part of my life. And as I was getting back to work and back to life and back to able to function, I didn't know it at the time. It took me, a long time to really understand this piece. Was, for the years and years following that, I really believed I was a loser. I felt like I was a loser because of the mistakes, because of my failures, because I just didn't know any better at the time. And it's like so much in my mind was I felt like a loser because I should have known better. And when I shut down my business and lost everything, and I had lost that fire and the fuel to rebuild, and even once I was ready to rebuild and I had taken the time or forced to take the time to heal and recover, there was still a part of me that felt empty, that felt like there was a hole. And what I had unconsciously done while I was in bed for those 6 months almost was I put away my doctor hat. Like I retired myself as a doctor because I felt so ashamed and I was exhausted. And as much as I wanted to be a doctor, I felt like a loser for not having known better. All the business mistakes that, they cost me millions of dollars. They cost me my marriage and my health. I felt like a loser because somehow it's like I believed that knowing how to be a doctor and take care of patients and owning a business somehow meant I was also supposed to know how to run it all successfully and not make any financial mistakes along the way. And I believed that, the business mistakes that cost me, and because I had to shut everything down, I believed I no longer deserved to be a doctor. I believed that I didn't have the right to be a doctor, that I had lost my privilege to care for people, and that I should no longer be allowed to really be a doctor. Because the part of me in my mind was like, besides, who wants to see the doctor who's like the loser doctor who can't even take care of her own financial business and who loses everything? That's what I was thinking unconsciously and never out loud, and I wouldn't even admit it at the time, but that's what was running in the background in my mind. And for me, it's like that idea that, well, if I'm not a doctor, and I believed that I was nothing and that I was a loser. Because it's like somewhere deep in my psyche, the depression that set in was a broken promise that I had made to my mom and to myself to be our protector, to be the provider for us. It was a promise that I made to her in middle school, but I even made that to myself because I knew I wanted to be a doctor when I was in second grade. And that was the promise that I made to us, because at the time, growing up, and I've shared this before, and growing up in a very chaotic home, that I was going to be the protector and the provider for my mom and for me. And so for me, that depression that lingered was because it was a broken promise that I had made, and I was not able to take care of my mom financially until even then. I cared for her and I was there for her while she was sick. But even until the very end when she passed, I wasn't able to financially support her the way I had promised to. And depression for me was believing that I was supposed to be better with money and to not fall prey to financial mistakes and failures. And it was the exhaustion of believing that I was supposed to know how to do everything right, especially in business, and never make mistakes, that it was supposed to be perfect, and my life, the image I created was perfect, and I needed to keep it because it was very crafted, very well, all the pieces. I wanted it, but it was also the image that I had created that was gone, about being successful and being the woman that can do everything. And when I look back, really what I see is depression was, I was stuck in that space because I was reliving every mistake and thinking to myself, if only I could have been smarter or better or stronger or fill in the blank, then I could have prevented this mistake from happening. And of course, hindsight, 2020, I look back now and I can clearly see the mistakes that I made. And in some ways that also made the sense of depression worse, because in seeing them, it drove into my mind that I wish I could have been smarter and better so that I could have avoided them at the time. And part of the depression for me was being so angry at myself for being so stupid at the time, for not seeing it happen. It's like that judgment on myself for being so stupid, for being so naive and taken advantage of and preyed on and not noticing. Part of that, the depression, was believing if I could have been different than the way I was, I could have avoided all the mistakes that led to my failure. Man. But the deepest wound was that I gave away so much of myself that I had nothing left and no energy left to rebuild and to fight for my own self and my life again. It's like I was gone. The person that I had been my whole life getting up to this place was gone. The part of me that can get up and go and make things happen. I was the person that could, the grit and the resilience and I can rebound from whatever, and I could start over and I'll make lemonade. And always that I'll find a little bit of optimism that I need and the hope required to get out of bed and figure it out. That person was gone. I was gone. And those were the parts of myself that I loved the most. I loved being the girl who had so much grit and perseverance. I loved being the one that had complete agency and complete responsibility for myself, that I didn't have to worry about anybody else. I loved being so independent and I could trust myself to always figure it out. Those are the parts of myself I loved most. And where I was at that time, all of those parts of me, I say that they were gone, but really they were tired. They were exhausted. They were tired of fighting. And if I went, going even deeper than that, I hated myself for losing all the parts of me that I treasured and valued most. I hated myself for not being the strong and independent woman that my mom raised me to be. I hated myself for being in the situation where everything that I worked for was gone. And I hated myself for who I had become. The person that was weak and in bed and unable to get up and get out and solve this problem and fix it. That part of me, I despised her. I was disgusted by her. I hated her with every fiber of my being. The girl that laid in bed and couldn't get out, I hated her. She was a loser to me. And that's precisely the belief that kept me stuck. That even when I was able to start the physical healing and the emotional healing and get my life back on track, I still looked at that part of me as a loser. Because for years, the shame and the humiliation of the mistakes kept me stuck in that cycle. Like I was starting to rebuild. I just couldn't kind of break that. I couldn't get through that. And it kept pulling me back down. I didn't understand it at the time. I couldn't let go of the belief that as a doctor, I was a loser. And I could not forgive myself for the failure and the financial mess that I had created. I could not forgive myself because I didn't believe I deserved to be forgiven. And that was really the root, keeping that in place. And I look at the time of how all those pieces came together with being, as a single mom and taking care of my mom while she was sick. And it was feeling like I was a bad mother and a bad daughter for breaking my promises to both of them and breaking the promise to myself. And those were the parts of me that I was just like, what a loser I was judging myself as, and hated those parts of me and hated for being that way. And this is what I want you to start to think about. Like, does any of this resonate with you? Maybe not my story, but if any parts of it. Because you can start to see the layers that overlap. Like, so, are you depressed? Maybe. Are you depleted? Possibly. Are you stuck? Very likely. Because it's really about, are you buying into a belief about yourself and judging yourself for your past, wishing you could have been just somehow different than the way you were at that time? Wishing you could have been different to avoid the painful circumstances or the event or the situation. And if you are saying yes to that, that's the piece that's keeping you stuck in the cycle of depression and depletion, because that's where your energy is being drained. And so that's where to start when you look at depression and depletion and burnout. Where you start, the path is like, you got to ask yourself and be really honest with yourself. You don't have to share it with anybody else. You can write it and then tear up the pages. But how much energy are you using to keep your secrets secret? How much energy do you use to hide your insecurities, hide your flaws, hide the way that you are? How much energy are you using to prop up an image or a brand that is incongruent with who you really are and what you really believe in your heart? How much energy are you using trying to keep up the social masks, to feel accepted, to do the things that you think you need to do to create this image, to be accepted, to be validated, to feel successful, to feel perfect? Because really, it's all of those things that you are doing because you want to feel loved. I did it. I have to pay attention because I'll still do it. That's part of the human mind and the human condition. It's not a judgment, it's the awareness of what's happening. How much energy do you use to suppress and repress all of your past failures, your mistakes, all of the unflattering parts of your life that you want to pretend didn't happen, or pretend like you're over it and it doesn't exist anymore? Because I know I believe that depression is really being stuck in the past, and that this is the overlooked piece of depression that isn't really like dealt with. And it's the replaying of the past events or scenarios or circumstances and situations, however you want to say it, wishing that you were somehow better or smarter or stronger or somehow different in order to avoid experiencing the pain that you felt. And even deeper is replaying all of those scenarios with an alternate ending so that you can pretend that you were different than how you actually were. So are you depressed? Are you depleted? Depletion is the energy that you spend keeping your life going, fighting to keep your life in its current form, continuing in the current way, even when you feel stuck or like life is just the way you created it is sucking the life out of you and not replenishing your energy to account for it. So it's kind of simple math, right? Energy output greater than energy input. The energy draining to the point of burnout, chronic fatigue, exhaustion, and then running on empty to the point where you just can't continue and beyond empty. And you've used every reserve to the point where your body is damaged, injured, the illness, the dis-ease, trying to survive. And so where to start, like I said, is about be honest, asking for help. Yes, nutrition matters. Hormones affect sleep and everything else, and quality of sleep and the amount of sleep is the start that can help start to just recognize what's happening in your mind. Make a promise to yourself that little by little you're going to get to the deepest root, the deepest belief at the core that is keeping you stuck. For me, it was buying into the belief that I was a loser for my mistakes. And it's really paying attention to all the ways that you are distracting yourself, because if you listen and if you're honest, your soul is letting you know. Your heart is telling you there's a hole and it hurts, and all the things that you are using to fill it is not working anymore. So that's at the top. The number one reason of feeling depressed is carrying the belief that you should have been better or smarter or more lovable in order to avoid some kind of pain that you experienced in the past. And the top reasons you feel depleted is trying so hard to keep your secrets secret and even hiding them from yourself. Trying to hide your insecurities, your flaws, trying to live up to unrealistic expectations, demands, or obligations, trying to prop up an image or brand that isn't working for you, but everyone else thinks that it should be. It's carrying the weight of the social masks you think you need to carry to feel accepted, to feel loved and lovable. And the symptom and depletion and depression and all of those layers, they all take time to work through and settle. If you catch yourself, if you hear yourself saying like, if only I could have, that's when you know you're stuck in something in the past that's draining your energy. So where to start? Well, there's no right way to start. Just start. If you need to stay in bed, you stay in bed. Excuse me. Be willing to know it takes time to unearth all of these beliefs. It's like they're going to bubble up, and you're going to have to address them one at a time as they come up. Don't go looking for the ones super deep. Start with the ones on the surface. As you heal one belief at a time, eventually you'll get to the deeper ones. Sorry, man. So that's where I want to really help pull this together for you about burnout, chronic exhaustion, depletion, depression, because they all overlap. They all have layers. There's a lot of similarities, but your willingness to take the time to take them apart is what's going to help you heal. Okay, well, I guess I am done. I am Dr. Natasha Nelson. Thank you for listening. Make sure you subscribe or share, leave me a comment. And this is Unleash Your Life Force. And until next time, I'll see you then. Bye.